All right. Welcome to week 3 of Bite Size Nutrition. Thanks for working with me on changing the time. I was just thinking, gosh, 8 o'clock is so far away and I'm off work today. So here we go. So this week's topic is intermittent fasting, but I kind of wanted to piggyback just a little tiny mini lesson on vitamins and minerals because it goes with our topic from last week when we talked about phytonutrients. So I'm going to make this really short, that part of it really short and sweet. I could absolutely spend many classes on vitamins and minerals, but I don't think most people find them that interesting. But I want to kind of just bring forward why we need vitamins and minerals, because I think everybody knows that they're important, but they have no idea why. So this is a list of the different vitamins, and some of them are what we call water soluble, which means they dissolve in water. And these ones are ones that we're going to need to make sure that we're getting most days, so that because we don't store them. They're just going to be excreted. So like when I see people who are concerned about their immune system, they're like, oh, I think I'm getting sick, and they are taking massive amounts of vitamin C. I'm like, you're just going to pee it out, unfortunately. Versus our water soluble vitamins like D and E and K, they can be stored in our body. They can be stored in our cells. Okay, so then we have, so that's these are the fat soluble vitamins. So I put this up here just so you can see, like, these are the kinds of things that we use vitamins for. And I have some of the good sources listed, but what I want to emphasize is you don't need to be concentrating unless you know you have some sort of vitamin deficiency or some kind of condition that requires an increased amount of one of these. I don't think you need to focus on, oh, I need to make sure I'm getting my vitamin A today. I need to make sure I'm getting my B1 today. What I prefer is that again, eat the rainbow, eat lots of different types of diverse foods. And if you're doing that, you're inherently going to get all of these things that you need. Okay. So I wouldn't get caught up on like getting particular vitamins. I also have a list of our minerals that we need. And again, here's some good sources, some of the things that we use it for, but it's just, again, eat a variety of foods, you're going to get this stuff covered. All right. Okay. So why do we need vitamins? So here I have an equation that maybe you remember from biology. And usually when I show this equation, all my students say, I remember that, that's photosynthesis. Not quite. It's actually the opposite. This is cellular respiration. So we use this equation to represent how we make energy for our cells. So ATP is our cell's form of energy. So in this process of making ATP, we require a lot of different vitamins and minerals and enzymes. So what enzymes do is they help make reactions happen faster. And if they don't happen fast enough in our body, then we would die. So we need all of these enzymes. And along the way, I'm going to show you really quick. It's going to look really scary, but just bear with me here. This is the actual process of this equation. Okay, so this we just simplify here, but really this is what's happening. At every single step of these chemical reactions, we have a different enzyme, and those enzymes need helpers. Okay, we call them coenzymes and cofactors. And a lot of these coenzymes and cofactors are actually like our vitamins and minerals. So here, I'll show an example. Okay. So this is part of that pathway I was showing, and all these places where it's highlighted, it's showing that the vitamin that is needed to do that, to help with that reaction. So I think that is really kind of what hit home for me when I took biochemistry. I was like, oh, I see now. We have all these chemical reactions we need to do to just exist. And so not only making energy, like if you're working out, but just to live and breathe. And if you don't have lots of vitamins and minerals in your diet, then these reactions cannot occur efficiently. So we think about making sure that we have enough energy. Okay. Also, some of the vitamins also act as antioxidants. So this is a picture from last week. We discussed free radicals or reactive oxygen species or reactive nitrogen species. And these are molecules that are very reactive, often because they're missing an electron. So they will go and just steal it from DNA, from proteins, from our lipids in our cell membranes, and cause damage to our body. So an antioxidant can go ahead and give them an electron. They don't need it. It's all good. It's not going to cause any damage to that molecule. Okay, so vitamin C is an antioxidant, and so is vitamin E. So that I just kind of wanted to shed a little bit of light there on why we need vitamins and minerals. And again, just don't get caught up in it unless you have a particular health condition that you're aware that you have increased needs for one of these vitamins or minerals. You don't need to concentrate on getting particular ones like from that chart that I showed you. You can just eat a variety of foods and you'll be good. Now, the question I know that I'm going to get right now is, what about taking a vitamin? Most of the supplements out there seem to be garbage and they're a waste of money, to be honest with you. I think that if you are, again, eating a rainbow of colors, lots of diverse foods, you probably don't need to take a multivitamin. So I think about it like my kids, like when I couldn't get them to eat a single vegetable, or they barely ate any fruit and they're just eating like grains, they need vitamins. So like I would give them a multivitamin, but most of you probably don't need to waste your money on that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting. So first I want to discuss what you need to do for intermittent fasting. So this can be done in a lot of different ways. I think really the more correct way to describe it would be time restricted eating, because when we just say intermittent fasting, this could mean that you completely fast for 2 days a week, or for a week at a time, or a day at a time, or it could be within certain hours of the day. So I'll go ahead and keep calling it intermittent fasting since that's what most people are familiar with hearing, but really this is time restricted eating that I'm going to be focusing on. So here I have some times that are that are written on here for suggesting like when you're going to eat and when you're going to fast. I do not operate this way. So I'm actually going to stop sharing to make sure you guys can see me a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit about my own experience with this. So I definitely was the type of person that as soon as I woke up, I wanted to eat breakfast. And then I feel like, me personally, once I start eating, I need to eat every 3 to 4 hours. So this was a huge adjustment for me. And I think that it's important that you guys learn to get in tune with your body and see what works best for you, because this is going to look different for everyone. Putting a time frame on the eating, I don't know that that's really important. What I do personally is I have my dinner, usually around 6 o'clock, and then I don't eat again until about 16 hours later. So sometimes maybe I'll have my dinner at 7 o'clock, and then I will eat my first meal of the day at like 11. So I do a 16-hour fasting window, and then 8 hours where I'm eating. But this might look different every day. I'm not going to put a time limit on it and put those constraints. And there's going to be days that I'm starving to death and I can't fast for 16 hours, and that's okay. And I had to work up to this. So I started by doing a 12-hour fasting window. I'd eat at maybe 6 o'clock at night. I'm eating again at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I can work my way up to 13 hours and then maybe 14 hours and so on. And that is what works best for me. And some people are going to feel like they're going to gnaw their arm off by 13 hours. And that's okay, because you can still get a lot of the benefits of intermittent fasting, even if you can't make it to 16 hours. But 16 hours seems to be kind of the ideal time based on the research. beyond 16 hours doesn't look like it has significantly higher health benefits. But again, you guys need to figure out what is going to work best for you. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So if you operate better and you just want to tell yourself between 12 and 8 is the only time I eat, good for you. That's totally fine. Some people are going to do better with doing their fasting window like later in the day, and sometimes people like it earlier. So I definitely incorporate the time I'm sleeping as a part of my fast. But I read a few articles that were demonstrating that there were more benefits to having your fasting window or your eating window earlier in the day. So like maybe I'd start my fast at like, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then go on and then eat like earlier in the morning. But even though I saw a lot of benefits with that in the research, I know personally for me, I'm not going to sleep very well if I'm fasting then. And if I'm hungry, I can't fall asleep. So for me, it works better to have my fasting, it be incorporated in my morning. And during that fasting time, you're allowed to have black coffee, tea, and water. I definitely survive off of coffee for the first several hours of the day. Black, of course, no milk and no sugar, because then you're not fasting anymore. So yeah, I'm just kind of share like my personal experience, but like I can speak on behalf of my mom, who she's tried doing this several times and like it just doesn't work for her and she doesn't feel good. And I also have a close friend that will only eat once per day, and that's what works for him and he feels great. But I even tried the last 2 days to see if I can increase my fasting window. I knew that I was going to be going out to dinner the last couple of nights, so I knew that I wasn't going to be eating as healthy. And so I was like, maybe I can just like eliminate one of my meals by fasting longer. And what happened was I made it until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but then I ate a massive meal. Like I ate my normal amount of food, and then I just kept going to the cabinet and like pulling out nuts and things like that. So it was kind of counterproductive because I ended up eating just as much as I would have if I had broken my fast at 10 or 11 a.m. and then had my meal, my snack, and then dinner and so on. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is going to look different for everyone. You have to listen to your body and figure out what works best for you. If you're going to be so hungry that you can't even function at work, then maybe this isn't the best idea. And then I don't think this applies to anyone that's on my Zoom right now with me, but if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, I don't recommend intermittent fasting. It will definitely hurt your milk supply too. And then we just don't want to put our body in any kind of starvation mode. I'll pause for a second here and I'm going to open up my chat window. Does anyone have any questions so far on what it means to do intermittent fasting? So 12 to 16 hour fasting window is what we're looking for.
I have a question.
Sure.
Maybe I totally just missed this because I have kids, but can you remind me why this is good?
Oh, I haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, okay. Or tell me later. That's fine. I just want to make sure you're doing it. Okay.
Okay. I have a question in the chat. Is any tea okay to drink? Yes. You can do coffee or tea as long as that you're not adding any sugar. I guess a sugar substitute would be okay as long as it's not a garbage one like aspartame. Stevia at this time, we believe, is okay. Honey would not be okay because that would break your fast because it does have sugar. So we're not consuming any calories during the time that we're fasting. Now, some people kind of work around this system by, this just reminded me, I remember everyone was adding MCT oil to their coffee during intermittent fasting. And that is a short chain fatty acid, which I discussed in a previous week, that you can use for energy. And some people found it easier to do the intermittent fasting if they can put like something like that in their coffee. It doesn't give it any flavor, but personally it caused some GI issues for me, gastrointestinal issues. So I'd be cautious on that. Okay, another question, would that include blue agave? Yeah, those all contain sugar. They're more natural forms than doing like a refined sugar. So like they're great. I have no problem with them. It's just that you're adding calories. And intermittent fasting, the reason why you can have like something like an oil or fat during that time is because that is not going to increase our insulin levels. So that's what we're kind of focusing on, is keep having a time period where we don't have insulin active, stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move forward here. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of intermittent fasting. So I think that the reason why it's gotten a lot of attention lately is people are using it for weight loss. So I want to mention that, okay, so I put here hypocaloric. So hypo means low, okay, like, and hyper would be high. So less calories. I do want to point out that there are a lot of studies that show that when we do a lower calorie diet, that we have better cognitive function. So that's cool. Like, you want to be able to concentrate better and have better memory. But I want to focus in a little bit on the weight loss part. So all right, so for me, this was helpful as a weight loss tool, because for me, when I start eating for the day, I want to eat every 3 to 4 hours. I'm going to be hungry. So if I can delay when that starts, that is going to eliminate a meal for me. But intermittent fasting in and of itself is not necessarily going to provide greater weight loss. So I did read a few studies that compared just people just restricting the number of calories or restricting the time that they ate. And both resulted in the same amount of weight loss. But there are other factors that are going to come into play that will be beneficial overall. So yes, it can be used as a weight loss tool if it's preventing you from consuming an extra meal. But like I just gave the example of me the last couple of days, and I noticed that if I try to extend that beyond that 16 hours to try to eliminate another meal, I am not going to eliminate it. I'm going to end up snacking all day. I guess it's also an issue of self-control, right? But I digress. Okay, so it can result in less calorie intake, because you're waiting to eat. So you might not have that extra meal. So I don't have my breakfast. Instead, I have I guess it'd be like brunch, right? It's kind of my lunch around 10 or 11. And then I have a snack, and then I have my dinner, and that's it. So I guess the other thing I should mention on that is it might take some getting used to for those of you guys who like to snack at night. And that was definitely, I think when I started doing intermittent fasting first, I had to work on just like getting used to not having a snack at night before bed. And then it was easier to transition into doing this. Okay. So it does increase, the other benefit is that people experience an increased energy levels. And I think there's several reasons for that. Some of them are listed below here, so there's some overlap. But what I thought was really cool was I found a study. Here's that scary picture again. That showed that people who practice intermittent fasting had increased levels of NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It's a molecule that is involved in this pathway in several places that I circled here to make energy. So this was our cellular respiration. So if you, I guess you could theorize, right, that if you have more NAD, it's going to be easier for your body to make the energy that it needs. We talked about inflammation last week. You can refer back to that video if you want a little bit more detail. I just went with a simple diagram that was in that video. But we noticed that there's decreased inflammation markers in people who practice intermittent fasting. And remember that there was a ton of diseases that are caused by inflammation or are have worse side effects if you have increased inflammation. Also, they've shown that it's a lower risk of cardiovascular disease because intermittent fasting can lead to reduced blood pressure, a lower resting heart rate. They saw improvements in people's lipid panels, so their LDL and HDL cholesterol, so increases in their HDL, our healthy one, and lowering of the LDL. Improvements in triglycerides. So this is another part of the lipid panel that they run. So when you get a lipid panel done, they're going to test your HDL, your LDL, and your triglycerides, and then they calculate your total cholesterol based on that. And then I'm going to talk more about this, I think on one of the future slides, but having insulin resistance is also a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And that is something that has been seen to be improved by intermittent fasting. Also, for inflammation, inflammation is part of the pathogenesis for atherosclerosis, where you get the clogging of your arteries. Okay, decreased oxidative stress. And we also have increased antioxidant activity. So I mentioned last week that we do have some endogenous or like stuff that's made inside of us to help with free radicals. So we can take them in our diet, but we also make them ourselves. So we saw increased antioxidant activity for the molecules that we make in our body for people who practice intermittent fasting. And remember, oxidative stress would be where we have a lot of these free radicals running around grabbing electrons from healthy cells. So we saw a reduction in that with intermittent fasting. And part of that could tie into inflammation, because as I mentioned last week, inflammation can cause oxidative stress, and oxidative stress can also cause inflammation. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. We also can increase insulin sensitivity. So when somebody tells me that they have issues with blood sugar, one of the first things I'm thinking is they should practice intermittent fasting. You just giving your body some time to reset and not have insulin spiking is awesome. So if you are resistant to insulin, basically you're not able to get sugar into your cells, which we need to make energy. All right, and then also on that, I think, oops, hold on. Got one more person trying to join us. Also, I have on here increased adiponectin, which is a hormone that you probably have never heard of. Adiponectin is produced in your fat cells, and we think that it is strongly tied to insulin sensitivity. We notice that people that have low adiponectin tend to be overweight, and they tend to have a less favorable glucose panel. So also, fun fact with that one, I had to study that quite a bit in my nutritional biochemistry class. They've also found that when you are overweight, because you actually kind of what we call downregulate the genes that make this hormone. So that is another concern that adds into the insulin sensitivity issue. We also are going to have a more favorable microbiome. Everything's coming back to that each week. So remember, we've got all these bacteria in our large intestine, a little bit in our small intestine, that are responsible for doing a whole host of things in your body. It's like a whole nother organ. And I'm not familiar at this time with the mechanism in which this happens, but they did do lots and lots of studies on intermittent fasting and looked and sequenced the person's microbiome to see if there were favorable changes, and there were. So reductions in our potentially pathogenic or dangerous, like the things that can actually harm us, bacteria, and increases in the ones that are good for us, that have been linked to all kinds of health benefits. And another one is increased autophagy. So auto means self, phagy, like to eat. So we have natural processes in our body to basically do cleanup of our cells. So if our metabolism is always active and we're always eating and we're always busy taking care of that, then you're not going to be doing as much autophagy. So we want our cells to clean themselves up. That's a good thing. And on that note, that ties into apoptosis. So apoptosis is basically cell suicide. And we want this to happen because over time, we get damage to our DNA. It's inevitable. I discussed last week that, we although we can get reactive oxygen species from our environment, we also are just having reactive oxygen species and free radicals being produced just while we're trying to survive and breathe and live. We inevitably will get damage to our DNA over time after cells reproduce so many times. And we want apoptosis to occur so that we can get rid of those cells that are no longer good to us. And if we don't, then we can continue having division, and it could lead to cancer. Now, I'm not saying intermittent fasting is going to prevent cancer, but I think that it's not too far of a stretch to say, like, hey, if we have less inflammation, we have less oxidative stress, we're able to clean up our cells, then sure, that definitely could be, we could possibly see a reduction in cancer risk. But I have not read any studies on that. That is actually something now that I want to look up now that I've been discussing it. So that is what I had for my slides. What questions can I answer? And if you guys want to throw it in the chat, or you guys can unmute yourself, but just know that I am recording this and potentially posting it. Is intermittent fasting the only way to increase adiponectin? So for sure, weight loss is going to increase adiponectin. And, I probably would have to do a little bit more research on that, because that was what my focus was when I was researching it before, but I could definitely look into that and get back to you. Adiponectin is a relatively recently discovered and studied hormone. Okay, sugar-free coffee creamer. Well, I think that would depend on what you choose, because what we're going to want to look at, give me a second, I can't minimize my Zoom. Cool. I'm going to share my screen. Let's look that up. Do you have a particular brand that you were thinking about? Because my concern is that it probably still has carbohydrates. That is what we're going to be concerned about. Can you see my screen? Yeah, there we go. There's my chat. My chat disappeared. Okay. So I imagine that the ones that, like, okay, here's coffee. I can't see that. Okay, like this one, this is Coffee Mate. This is low enough, like it's only 1 gram of carbohydrates. I don't recall what the cutoff is to technically stay fasted. I just avoid eating any calories. This one only says 2 grams. That one says 3. That one might be okay. But yeah, there's a lot of keto ones too, like that. Some researchers say, no, you can't have any calories for it to remain fasted. But then I also have seen a lot of people say, no, you can have healthy fats instead. So like those keto ones might be okay, but you're just looking at the total carbohydrates. You want that as low as possible. It's carbohydrates predominantly that's going to keep you or not have you in a fast. Okay, another question. What schedule is best for intermittent fasting? Oh yeah, you came in a little bit late. So I'm thinking you want to have a period of time that you have 12 to 16 hours where you're not consuming anything. Okay. 12 to 16 hours. And then like even just the time you wait in between meals can help with some of those things that I mentioned, like insulin sensitivity and like autophagy and things like that. How long did it take you to adjust to the fasting? That's a good question. I believe that if I recall correctly, I probably spent, it was like, I try to remember. There's a good amount of time where I was doing just the 12 hours. And then at some point I was like, I think I can make it to 13. And then I remember in the beginning, it took like a while before I could increase that amount of time, but I felt like it was really easy to go from like 13 hours to 16 hours personally. Cool. All right. Okay. So I have something that said the obesity code, which is written by an endocrinologist. They said absolutely nothing but black coffee. Yeah, it's definitely a debate in the research, and even like how to fast. Like, so I'm talking about the 12 to 16 hours because I think that's more doable than some of the other, like some people say, no, like it really has to be like full day fast to have all these benefits, but it's mixed. And then, yeah, there's a lot of researchers that say, no, we can still mimic the effects of fasting with by still consuming just fats. Yeah, I'm not sure. The research is definitely mixed there. I just go with nothing but black coffee or tea. Okay, for the benefit, should intermittent fasting be done on a daily basis or less frequent depending on the individual? That is a great question. I don't think you have to do it every day. Just like, you know, we're not going to get all these things in our diet every day either, right? Like, I think that it's fine as long as you're aware of these things and know that they have benefits, and you do it as much as you can. And as there are definitely days that I'm like, nope, can't do it. I'm starving to death. You'll still see those benefits. It's not going to like completely reset you versus like, I'm thinking like, okay, a diet like keto, which we can totally, I'm thinking I'm going to start doing some of these classes on the specific diet types, because I'm sure that's what people are really interested in. But like a keto diet, like that's not a diet where I can say like, oh, like it's okay if you're not super strict all the time and don't always do this. No, like you will not be in ketosis if you decide to, eat a candy bar or whatever. That's like more strict. But I would say for this, like if you do this even a few times a week, I'm sure that you could see benefits. Okay, sometimes I'm hungry first thing in the morning. Yeah. So for me, like I battle that with like, I'm like, all right, I'll have my cup of coffee, and I do like black coffee. So I guess I'm lucky in that way. And I see how I do. And then the other thing is like, in the morning, there's like a lot going on. I'm busy. So that's an easier time for me to ignore my hunger versus like at night. I would not be able to just ignore my hunger at night. What other questions? You can adjust your window according to your schedule when you're used to it and need to. Yep, definitely. Absolutely. That is what I've done. And like I mentioned, like I don't say like I only eat between these hours. I have my dinner. The next day I wait as long as I can, and then I eat. What else? All right. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm gonna stop the recording. All right. So after I ended the recording during the live workshop, I got a few really good questions that I just wanted to quickly address here. So one of the questions was about exercising while you're fasted. So I shared that when I first started doing intermittent fasting, I definitely was not able to exercise in the morning during my fasting window. I would typically just wait until after I ate before I would exercise. But as I've gotten used to it, I adjusted. So now I'm able to, even when I'm really close to the end of my fasting window, like I was planning on eating around 10 or 11 today, I went on a run at 9:30 and I was perfectly fine. So I would say that it may or may not work for you, and you just need to adjust accordingly. So let's see. Another question I got was about kids. And so I looked to see if there was any research on this before I spoke, but there really isn't. And I'm going to go ahead and venture to say that because kids are growing so fast, they probably should not practice intermittent fasting. They need those calories, just like the same recommendation for somebody who is breastfeeding or is pregnant. If you are growing a human or you are a growing human, you probably should not do intermittent fasting. So I'm reading the chat here to see what other questions had come up. Oh, really good question. If you are feeling sick, should you do intermittent fasting? And I would say that depends. So I know personally, sometimes when I'm sick, I feel hungrier, and sometimes I feel like I have no appetite. And I think, our body kind of is going to tell us what it needs. So I would definitely say if you're really hungry and you're not feeling well, or even if you're feeling perfectly fine, if one morning you're just starving, eat. It's okay. You don't have to be doing these things every single day, just like you're not going to be getting every single nutrient every day. As long as we're just doing a variety of things and we're aware and we're trying to do best practices and pay attention to things that have beneficial effects for our health, then we should be good. And the other question I got was about when should you eat fruit? So I can speculate on this and say that the longer you're not consuming carbohydrates through your day, you're probably going to have still some of the impact of fasting, even if you have started eating. But my advice is, like, let's not get that technical, because the more strict these things seem, the less likely you are to continue doing them. So if you feel better when you have carbohydrates earlier in the day, and sugars, then do that. I know personally, I used to prefer them later in the day and I felt like I slept better, but now I feel much better if I consume them earlier in the day. So my advice would be, try having fruit first. How do you feel a half an hour later, an hour later, 2 hours later, and so on? Try eating eggs, see how that makes you feel, doing some sort of other protein. Do you feel good after a few hours, or do you feel like you're starving to death? Or I think that different foods impact people differently, but you need to treat your body like your laboratory and decide what works best for you. And you can continue moving towards the ideal situation over time, but it doesn't have to all be right away. All right. See you guys next week.